Okay? And these plantations are places where bad stuff happened. Like people were held as slaves, right? And a lot of terrible things happened. People were killed for money, right? But is it okay to restore these houses, right? Houses of the owners, to make them look beautiful again so people can go see them? Or should we just destroy the house and say, whatever, build something else? Disneyland. The history itself of that place is terrible, not good. But the building and the architecture is beautiful.
Yes.
Or the history that's there, even though it's bad history, was something that we need to remember. So what do? Where do you stand on this? I know it's difficult. It's a really difficult question. I personally don't know. That's why I'm asking. Like, I see good points to restoration and bad points to restoration, right? And I'm struggling to see which way is the most correct thing to do.
What do you mean the building has the bad history? I mean, we have to know about war history,
right.
So maybe we have to how can I say about the Hiroshima Genbakudan. We have to.
Yeah, we have to know about that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, restoring it would definitely help us remember, right, and help us know about these things. So that's the argument for restoration. Like, even though it's terrible history, we still need to know it, right? On the flip side, like, there is a line between having something restored so that it could tell us what it is, versus having something restored to glorify that bad history, to make that bad history seem good and think, yeah, everything is great, right? And that's with buildings particularly, that's something that's really difficult, because buildings, especially architecture I really like old, like Taisho Meiji architecture. I think it's really awesome. There's a lot of like background to those kind of things, and a lot of that background can be lost when you restore it and you make it look so great. You know what I mean? So. Oh.
It's difficult.
Yeah. So let me kind of make it into a little bit more of a modern example, and then you tell me how you would deal with this. Okay. Let's say you build a house. A very beautiful house. Outside, awesome. Beautiful. Gardens, everything. And then someone that you lend the house to, you rent it out, and that person kills someone in that house.
I know.
Bam! The person died in the house.
Yeah.
Do you clean the house up? And then say, yeah, look, someone might have died here, but it's a beautiful house. Or do you just tear it down and build a new house?
I think it's depend on the people.
Yeah.
Maybe the house that we roar
Mm-hmm.
because the jikobuken. Yeah, some people think that I don't want to live this house.
Right.
Some people I want to live because cheap.
Right.
Yeah.
So, especially with jikobuken, this is what I heard. If you live in it, if someone lives in it once and they move away, it's no longer a jikobuken, right? So you can still charge rent. So there's some argument to keeping it, leaving it alone, or to making it nice again. But there was a murder in that house.
Yeah, so in Japan,
Yeah.
is also jikobuken.
Yeah.
So we thought, yeah, there is a ghost.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah, but the ghost. Yeah. So.
Mm,
Again, this is why I brought up this situation, because it's so difficult, right?
yeah.
Yes, there are ghosts in Chikobuken, right? Yes, there are like these reasons why you would not want to live there. You can bring this back to that brothel house, right? Brothel house is a very terrible place, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Lots of terrible stuff happened in there, right? Stuff that we don't really know, maybe, but we know it's a brothel. We know it's associated with bad things, right? But the building itself is very beautiful,
Yeah.
and it's the only one that's left from the Taisho era.
Mm.
The only one. What do you do?
Yeah.
I'll show you a picture of it.
Mm.
Beautiful.
So there's red lights on the outside.
Yeah.
Red lights mean red light district, that area, right?
Mm.
Kabukicho, right?
Ah.
That kind of area.
It's like Sento Chihiro.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. It's like Spirited Away. That kind of place,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So very nice architecture, very nice building.
Yeah.
But what happened in that building many years ago is not good. So what do you do?
I think it have to keep
Mm-hmm.
because we can build again. Maybe we can build like a Taisho building,
Mm-hmm.
but this is not real.
Yeah, it's a replica. Yeah. I'm really leaning heavily towards restoration.
Mhm.
Again, like you said, it's Taisho building. Not very many exist, especially not very many that look like that,
Mm.
right? Because this one was built for that purpose. There's a garden inside.
Yeah.
There's a garden inside the house. There's like all these different rooms that are like separated with like screen doors and everything. Very beautiful paintings on the inside. But
So. Taisho era. Yeah.
it was built in 19?
Yeah. So I know some major era to Taisho era's building. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So red Renga. Just a minute. The red brick.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Ah, those areas.
Yeah.
those
This
buildings.
is a major to Taisho era's building.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it is a beautiful and
Yeah.
preserved building.
Yeah. Not very many of them exist, which is really interesting. Like those red brick buildings, I see them in Tokoname.
Mm.
Konami?
Tokoname has some. In Nagoya,
Yeah.
there is if you go to Sakae,
Mm.
there is some like Meiji era buildings,
Yeah.
like with marble and like big stone. It used to be a bank.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Let's see. There is an argument to be made about those buildings, right? This right here. This building right here.
Mm.
This is an old Meiji building. It was built in the Meiji era. You can even see it by the way that the. This is an old bank.
Mm.
It's Susumidomo. Right? This is like emblematic of like a Meiji era building, and like restoration for this is not problematic because it's a bank, right? But the other building, it's a brothel.
Oh.
That history is bad.
I, so in Japan,
Mm.
so you said so
Brothel.
Brussels building is the World Heritage building.
It is a not a World Heritage, but it's cultural
Yeah.
heritage. Yeah.
So for example, so, yeah, so, Tomioka,
Mm.
Tomioka,
市場
yeah, Seisho. So I don't know. So what's the English name? Ah, okay.
Taiyoshi Hakuban.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How about the castle, Nagoya Castle? That's so long history,
Right.
and so many people died around
Right.
Nagoya Castle. That's sad history.
Right.
But Nagoya Castle exists right now.
Yes. It was rebuilt, right?
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
destroyed during the bombing of Nagoya, and it was rebuilt. Yeah. What about that? That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think most historical buildings, like Shunya said, like there's buildings that have all this historical like
Mm.
baggage. There's a lot of horrible stuff that happened in these historical buildings. And how do you reconcile it? Like how do you deal with that? Do you recognize it? Because like, do you recognize a lot of people died here? Or do you just ignore it and say, look, it's a beautiful building?
Yeah.
だから本能寺も
Yeah,
キ
Honnoji.
ャッスルも同じ。
Every castle in Japan has had to deal with that, right? Inuyamajo, right? Kyosujo.
Yeah.
Like, all of these, there's
So I think the time is most important thing.
uh-huh.
If the spending so long time, the history can be the beautiful.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good argument for restoration and preservation, which I think is good. Like I'm all for that. I'm really, this is my personal struggle. I'm like dealing with this.
Yeah.
I really like that Taisho, Meiji Taisho era
Yeah.
architecture. It's like I think it's really beautiful. There's a lot of it in Korea. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Because
I know.
colonial Korea, right?
Mm.
It was a colony of Japan. A lot of people there in Korea want to destroy all that stuff. They want to like just do away with it and build over it and make it Korean, right? Is that okay?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you're like, dude, history, like preserve it. It's beautiful. Like, It's part of your history. On the other hand, it's painful history, right? Because
Yeah.
colonialism, right? There's no answer. And you can do the same thing for Harbin. You know Harbin
Yeah.
Yeah.
in China, Manchuria.
Harbin.
Harbin.
Huh? Halloween.
Harbin.
Halloween.
하르빈. 뭔가 약간
It's in Manchuria. It's in China.
place?
Yeah, it's a place in China. No, let's go. So, it's in China, city in Harbin. Right here. It's in Manchuria, off the coast, like really close to North Korea.
Yeah,
Harbin.
yeah.
It is a place that has a mixture of cultures, but a lot of it is colonial Japan,
Oh.
because Harbin used to be the capital of Manchukuo, which was a puppet state under control of Imperial Japan. So they had some really impressive architecture, really impressive buildings. The red brick building that you were talking about,
Oh.
it's right there.
Yeah.
Like, do you preserve that stuff? Because it's its history.
Is it China?
This is in China.
Really?
Yeah.
Like Europe? Or...
Europe and so
This
yeah,
is
it is India.
this is a Russian building,
Mm.
right? This is a building built by Japan.
Mm.
It uses Japanese style bricks.
So now.
Colonial Japan, right?
Mm.
During the time when Japan went into China and tried to make something there, right?
Yeah.
Built by colonial Japan, by the Japanese Imperial Army. Like, is that history okay to maintain, preserve, or should it be erased?
Mm.
That's where we're going, right, with this. Like, it starts with a brothel, yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But then once you move past that, it's like, okay, what other examples of this stuff is there? There's Harbin, there's Busan in Korea, and like Seoul. You see examples of this in North Korea too.
Yeah.
And not just with Japan. You see it in America too. Right?
Yeah.
The Philippines.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The Philippines has a lot of old buildings that were built by the United States because the United States was a colonial authority. Do you keep those buildings? History.
Yeah.
Yeah, history is
Right.
really painful, right?
Mm.
But you keep them as
Yeah.
because they're beautiful. Do you like rebuild them with a plaque saying this is where it was built
Yeah.
to kind of show the history? I don't know what the answer is. I'm still struggling with this.
It's
Church.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Yes. The American has controlled the Japanese culture, maybe. You say the Japan has a lot of American building.
Yeah.
No?
I wouldn't say it's American. I would say it's like Western style architecture. Like during the Meiji period, there was a really big move away from building in the traditional style with like wood and stuff like that, in small buildings, to copy like Western European ideals. Like so, the building in Sakae was built to model stuff in Europe. It was built to look like stuff in Prussia and France. This website, my friend runs this website. He's really big on architecture, and this is examples of colonial architecture built by Japan in Korea. And there's all these articles written about like these buildings and stuff, with old pictures and like recent pictures of buildings if there still exists.
How about Japanese language? I learned Japanese, the teaching the Japanese
Yeah, they
to
taught
Korean.
Yeah, they taught Japanese language in Korea and in Taiwan too.
But now it doesn't exist.
Yeah. All of the older people can still speak it.
Can't speaking.
The older people,
Mm.
like around like the same generation as your grandparents.
Mm.
A lot of the older generation Korean, Taiwanese, they can still speak Japanese.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
But all of those people are so old now. They're all dying. One of my friends, her dad is from Taiwan.
Mhm.
His mom speaks fluent, or spoke. She recently passed away. She spoke fluent Japanese, and fluent
Chinese.
not Chinese. It was the language before Chinese that was in Taiwan. Taiwanese, I think I want to say. It was not Chinese. So she communicated mostly in Japanese.
Why continue to teach in Japanese?
It stopped,
Mhm.
but people who learned how to speak Japanese just continue to speak it. But most of the language, especially in Taiwan, they just went back to using either Taiwanese or Chinese. Now it's mainly Chinese. In South Korea or in Korea, it went from like they were speaking Japanese for like administrative and stuff like that. But once Japan left, they went back to using Korean.
Yeah.
So the same thing could be said. There's a country in the South Pacific, Palau.
Palau. Ah.
They use Japanese still
Mm.
as one of their official languages.
So when I lived in Vietnam, so I found this Japanese style building in Vietnam.
Mm. It's so.
There were some incursions in Japanese, like during the war. There was a lot of Japanese outposts.
So in Hoi An, yeah, do you know Hoi An?
Mm.
Yeah, so Hoi An is a famous lantern. Yeah, so in the past, so Nippon Bridge called Nyetan Bridge.
Mm.
Yeah, Vietnam called Nyetan. Yeah, so it was built by Japanese people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What's the name of the bridge again?
So,
Hoi An?
yeah. So, yeah, this bridge is.
This one.
Yeah, there is also Vietnamese money. Yeah, paper.
But it was built by Japan.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Japanese.
Colonial army, the Japanese Imperial Army built that.
Uh,
That's crazy.
yeah. So,
You see examples of this all over East Asia. Like, it's really crazy. And again, not to say what was good or bad. This was just the time, what everybody was doing at the time. You see a lot of German architecture in Africa, a lot of British architecture, French architecture. You see all these things
yeah.
in like the colonial possessions. So it's only natural that like you would see stuff like this. The question is, should it stay?
Mhm.
Should you tear it down and build something else? Again, there's no right answer. You know, like, it's up to you guys to decide what's gonna happen with these kind of things. Like your generation's gonna decide these.
So this.
Yeah. Oh, dude, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I have a yeah.
It's nice. Like that's the weird thing is like my generation, like and we're quite similar, but your grandparents were the ones who dealt with, or your great grandparents dealt with that like stuff, right? You guys, because you're so far removed from all of that horribleness, right, of the war and stuff like that, you guys get to decide like what's gonna stay, what you guys are gonna preserve, and what is gonna go away. Like that's gonna be on you guys. So it's a very big responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's something it would be really helpful to think about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, thank you.